The first time Zara Kensington tried to leave before the Vampire King bought every flower, he simply waited at the corner until she gave up and came back. She had been selling flowers outside the castle for 3 months now, every evening as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city's nocturnal residents began to stir. The castle sat at the edge of the old district, a Gothic monstrosity of gray stone and iron gates that looked like it had been transplanted from another century and dropped into the heart of a modern metropolis. Most people hurried past it. Zara set up her cart directly beneath its western wall, where a street lamp cast just enough light to make the roses and lilies glow. He appeared every night at exactly 8:15, tall, impossibly so, with hair the color of fresh snow that fell past his shoulders and skin like marble in moonlight. His eyes were dark, nearly black, and he wore clothes that managed to look both timeless and expensive. The first night, he had approached her cart, studied every bucket and arrangement for a long, silent minute, and then said, "I'll take them all." Zara had laughed. "All of them?" "Yes. That's $400 worth of flowers." He had pulled a wallet from his coat and counted out $500 bills without blinking. "Will this suffice?" She had stared at the money, then at him, then at her cart full of flowers that she had expected to sell over the course of a week. "I mean, yes, but good." He had gathered every bucket, every wrapped bouquet, every single stem, balancing them with an ease that shouldn't have been possible, and walked back toward the castle gates without another word. The second night, she had brought twice as many flowers, thinking perhaps it had been a wedding or a funeral, a one-time extravagance. He had bought them all again. Same time, same quiet transaction, same impossible armload disappearing through the iron gates. By the third week, Zara had started buying flowers from every wholesaler within 50 miles. Her tiny apartment had become a forest of buckets and vases, every surface covered in blooms that she would cart down to the castle each evening. The money was extraordinary. She had paid off her mother's medical bills within the first month. By the second month, she had enough saved to think about things like security deposits and business licenses. But by the third month, the question of why had become unbearable. So tonight, when he arrived at 8:15 exactly, moving through the lamplight like something out of a painting, Zara stepped in front of her cart and crossed her arms. "No," she said. He stopped. Those dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Up close, he was even more striking sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked carved rather than formed, and an absolute stillness that marked him as something other than human. "No?" His voice was low, barely more than a whisper, but it carried. "I'm not selling to you tonight, not until you tell me why you're doing this." For a moment, she thought he might simply leave. He looked at the flowers, then at her, then past her toward the castle. When he spoke again, there was something almost like weariness in his tone. "Does the reason matter?" "Yes." "Why?" Zara felt her frustration spike. "Because you've bought tens of thousands of dollars worth of flowers from me, and I don't even know your name. Because you never smile, never explain, never do anything except show up and take them all away. Because—" She stopped, surprised by the heat in her own voice. "Because it's driving me crazy." The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but close. "Mihai," he said. "What?" "My name, Mihai Bathory." The surname sent a chill down her spine. Everyone in the city knew that name, or at least knew of it. The Bathory family had owned the castle for as long as anyone could remember, had been part of the city's aristocracy since before the modern streets were paved. There were rumors, of course. Whispers about what kind of people never aged, never appeared in daylight, never seemed to change across generations. "You're the—" "Yes." He moved closer, and she caught the scent of something cold and clean, like winter air. "Does that frighten you?" Zara thought about it honestly. "Should it? Most would say so. Most people don't have conversations with you, I'm guessing." That almost smile again. "No, they don't." He glanced at the cart behind her, at the roses and peonies and stargazer lilies she had arranged that afternoon. "I buy the flowers because they're beautiful, because they die, because I can carry them somewhere and leave them there, and know that in a few days they'll be gone, and that's as it should be." It was the most words he had ever said to her at once, and they raised more questions than they answered. but there was something raw in his voice, something that made her uncross her arms. "Where do you take them?" she asked quietly. "The garden, behind the castle." He looked at her directly then, and she saw something ancient in those eyes, something that had seen too much. "There are graves there, people I failed to save a very long time ago." The admission hung in the air between them. Zara felt her anger drain away, replaced by something more complicated. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked. "Bringing flowers?" He considered. "Decades, perhaps a century. Before you, there were others who sold them. Before the sellers, I grew them myself. But that became difficult." "Why?" "I stopped leaving the castle as often. It seemed wiser to stay inside." His gaze drifted past her again, toward the iron gates. "But when I saw you here, in the lamplight, with your cart, I remembered how it felt to walk outside at dusk, so I started coming out again." Zara's throat tightened unexpectedly. She had spent 3 months thinking of him as an eccentric rich man, maybe even a fool with more money than sense. But this was something else entirely. This was loneliness and guilt wrapped in ritual, and she recognized it because she had her own version, her own habits that kept her tethered to a past that couldn't be changed. "My father died when I was 19, she said. The words came out before she could stop them. "He loved flowers. He had a whole garden behind our house, nothing fancy, just whatever he could get to grow. After he died, my mom and I couldn't keep it up. The garden died too, and it felt like losing him again. That's why I started selling flowers. It felt like, I don't know, like keeping something alive." Mihai's expression shifted, softened almost imperceptibly. "Then we are both gardeners of memory." "I guess so." He stepped back, giving her space. "I should let you return home. It's late." "Wait." Zara grabbed one of the wrapped bouquets, a mix of white roses and blue delphiniums. "Take this, no charge, for tonight." He looked at the flowers, then at her. "Why?" "Because now I know why. And because—" She held it out until he took it. "Because you shouldn't have to do this alone. The remembering, I mean." His fingers brushed hers as he accepted the bouquet, and they were cold, but not unpleasantly so. "Tomorrow," he said. "If you come again, I would like to show you the garden, if you're willing." Zara felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. "I'm willing." He inclined his head, a gesture that seemed courtly and old-fashioned, and walked back toward the castle with the flowers cradled carefully in his arms. Zara watched him go, watched the gate swing open as if by invisible hands, and wondered what exactly she had just agreed to. The next evening, she brought only a small arrangement. When Mihai appeared at 8:15, he looked at the modest bouquet and then at her nearly empty cart. "You brought fewer," he observed. "Well, you invited me inside. I figured you wouldn't need to buy as many if I was delivering them directly." Something that might have been amusement crossed his face. "Logical." He offered his arm, another old-fashioned gesture that made her feel like she had stepped into a different era. "Come." Zara hesitated only a moment before taking it. His arm was solid beneath her hand and cool even through the fabric of his coat. They walked through the iron gates together, and she heard them clang shut behind her with a finality that should have been frightening, but somehow wasn't. The castle grounds were larger than they looked from the street. A cobblestone path wound through carefully maintained lawns, past fountains that gleamed in the moonlight. The castle itself loomed above them, all spires and arched windows, lit from within by warm golden light that spilled out onto the stones. "How many people live here?" Zara asked. "Currently, 17, including myself. The court has diminished over the years. Many have chosen to sleep rather than remain active in this modern age." "Sleep?" "A form of hibernation. Some of my kind find the changes in the world too jarring and choose to rest for decades or centuries until things feel familiar again." He guided her around the side of the castle, toward a high stone wall covered in ivy. "I have considered it myself, many times. Why haven't you?" "Stubbornness, perhaps, or fear that if I sleep, I will wake to a world where everything I knew is truly gone." He pushed open a wooden door, set into the wall, and the hinges moved silently. "After you." The garden beyond was breathtaking. It was larger than Zara had imagined, easily an acre of carefully tended beds and winding paths, enclosed on all sides by high stone walls. Flowers bloomed everywhere despite the season roses climbing trellises, lily beds glowing white in the darkness, entire sections devoted to peonies and irises and flowers she couldn't even name. Lanterns hung from iron posts, casting pools of golden light, and throughout it all, scattered like stones in a stream, were graves. They weren't large or ostentatious, simple markers, most of them, weathered with age. Some had names carved into them, others just had dates. Every single one was covered in fresh flowers, the flowers he had bought from her over the past 3 months. "There are 47 of them," Mihai said quietly. "People I was supposed to protect. People who died because I was careless or too slow or too young to understand the consequences of my actions." Zara walked forward slowly, reading the names on the stones. Some of the dates went back hundreds of years, others were more recent, 50 years ago, 70. The flowers on each grave were arranged with obvious care, and she recognized her own handiwork in the bouquets, the way she wrapped stems in paired colors. "You didn't kill them," she said. "No, but I failed to save them." Mihai moved to stand beside one of the graves, a simple stone marker that read, "Elena, 1823. She was 8 years old. There was a fire in the city, and I pulled her family from the building, but I wasn't fast enough. The smoke had already taken her. I held her while she died, and I swore I would never forget." "So you bring her flowers?" "I bring them all flowers. Every night I walk this garden and I remember each name, each face, each failure. It's penance, I suppose, or perhaps just an old man's ritual." Zara turned to look at him. In the lantern light, he looked both impossibly young and infinitely old. "How long has it been since someone told you that you don't have to punish yourself forever?" "No one has ever said that." "Well, I'm saying it now." She set down the bouquet she had brought and walked over to him. "You can remember them without treating yourself like you're the one who should have died instead. They wouldn't want this. Not for centuries." Mihai's dark eyes met hers, and she saw something crack in them, a wall that had been standing for too long. "How can you possibly know what they would want?" "Because I know what my father would want. And he'd tell me to stop using him as an excuse to be sad, to live a half-life selling flowers instead of planting them." Her voice caught. "He'd tell me that memory should make you kinder, not harder, and I think the people in this garden would tell you the same thing." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched her cheek with cold fingers. "You're extraordinary, Zara Kensington." Her breath caught at the sound of her name in his mouth. "How do you know my full name?" "I asked the flower wholesalers. I wanted to know who the woman with the lamplight cart was." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I wanted to know who had made me want to leave the castle again." "Mihai, I am a monster in many ways," he said softly. "I have lived for 6 centuries. I have killed to survive, and I will do so again. I am cold. I do not age. I will never be human again. But when I stand in your light, I remember what it felt like to be warm." Zara felt tears prick her eyes. "You're not a monster. You're just someone who's been alone too long. Perhaps." He let his hand fall. "But alone or not, there are complications you should understand. My court is not pleased that I have been leaving the castle so regularly. There are tensions in our world right now, old feuds rising again, territories being challenged. They believe I should remain inside, fortified and prepared. Are you in danger?" "We are always in danger. It is the nature of what we are." He turned to look at the graves again. "But yes, more than usual. There is a faction that believes the old families have become too soft, too willing to coexist with humans. They want to return to the old ways, when we ruled openly and took what we needed without asking." Fear spiked through her, cold and sharp. "Will they come here?" "I won't allow it. This castle has stood for 800 years, and it will stand for 800 more." The authority in his voice was absolute, the voice of someone who had commanded for centuries. "But I need to know, are you afraid of me now? Of what I am? Of what my world contains?" Zara thought about it honestly. She should be terrified. She was standing in a vampire's garden, surrounded by graves, discussing ancient feuds and blood, and immortal politics. But when she looked at Mihai, all she saw was someone who brought flowers to people who were long past needing them, someone who carried guilt like a cloak and wore loneliness like armor. "No," she said, "I'm not afraid of you." "Then you're either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both." She picked up the bouquet again and handed it to him. "Here, show me which grave needs these tonight." Something like wonder crossed his face. Then he took the flowers and led her deeper into the garden. They fell into a rhythm after that. Every evening at dusk, Zara would bring her cart to the castle gates, and Mihai would come out to meet her. Sometimes he bought a few bouquets. Sometimes he just walked with her, and they would talk about flowers and memory, about the city's changes, about books and music and all the small things that make up a life. He told her about the centuries he had lived, about watching the world transform from candlelight to electricity, from horses to cars, from silence to constant noise. She told him about growing up in the city, about her father's garden, about the way she had felt unmoored since he died, like she was floating through life without an anchor. "You don't seem unmoored to me," Mihai said one evening. They were sitting on a stone bench in the garden, surrounded by night-blooming jasmine. "You seem purposeful, determined." "That's just stubbornness. I'm good at keeping moving so I don't have to think about where I'm going." "And where do you want to go?" Zara looked at him, at the way the moonlight caught in his white hair and made his skin glow. "I don't know. I used to think I wanted to open a real flower shop, something permanent. But lately I've been thinking that maybe the cart is enough. Maybe being in one place isn't the point." "What is the point then?" "Finding someone who makes staying feel like a choice instead of a trap." The words were out before she could stop them, and she felt her cheeks heat. "Sorry, that was true?" Mihai turned to face her fully, and his eyes were intense in the darkness. "Zara, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to pound. "Okay. I have lived for 600 years. In that time, I have known many people, humans and vampires alike. I have had lovers, friends, enemies, allies. I have felt many things." He reached out and took her hand, and his fingers were cold but steady. "But I have never felt what I feel when you arrive each evening. I've never wanted someone's company the way I want yours. And it terrifies me, because I know what I am, and I know what you are, and those things are not meant to fit together." Zara's throat was tight. "What if I don't care about what's meant to be?" "You should. There are consequences to being close to me, danger from my world, and the knowledge that I will not age while you do. That I will watch you grow old and die unless—" He stopped abruptly. "Unless what?" "Unless you chose to become what I am, but I would never ask that of you. The turning is a death and a rebirth, and it cannot be undone. It would be monstrous of me to even suggest it." Zara felt her breath catch. She had known on some level that this conversation was coming. Had felt it building every time Mihai looked at her with those ancient eyes, every time his cold hand brushed hers, and she felt warmth anyway. "What if I wanted to ask?" she said quietly. "No." The word was sharp, almost harsh. "Zara, you cannot know what you would be giving up. Sunlight, warmth, the taste of food, the ability to have children, to age naturally, to die when your time comes. I will not be responsible for taking those things from you." "But what if—" "No!" He stood abruptly, and she saw real fear in his face for the first time. "I have taken too much from too many people. I will not take your humanity as well, no matter how much I—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "No matter what I feel." Zara stood too, frustration and hurt warring in her chest. "So what then? We just keep doing this, meeting at dusk, talking in your garden, pretending that there's a future here when you've already decided there isn't?" "I don't know." His voice was raw. "I only know that I cannot damn you to this existence. I won't. That's not your choice to make. Yes, it is. I'm the one who would have to turn you, and I refuse." They stared at each other, the space between them suddenly vast. Then Zara picked up her empty flower buckets and headed for the garden gate. "Where are you going?" Mihai's voice followed her. "Home. I need to think." "Zara, no, you don't get to tell me what I can and can't choose, and then expect me to just stay here like nothing happened." She turned at the gate and her eyes were burning. "I'll come back tomorrow. but only because you're not the only one who's stubborn." She left before he could respond, and the walk back through the castle grounds felt longer than it ever had before. But she did come back the next evening, and the evening after that. Mihai never apologized, but he also never brought up turning again. They danced around it, around each other, having careful conversations about safe topics, while the real question hung between them like smoke. It went on for 2 more weeks. Then everything changed. Zara was setting up her cart as usual, arranging the last of the day's roses, when a man approached from the opposite direction. He was tall and pale like Mihai, with white blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. He moved with the same predatory grace, and she knew immediately what he was. "You're the flower girl," he said. His voice was smooth, almost pleasant, the one who has captured our king's attention. Zara straightened, her instincts screaming danger. "Who are you?" "Vasile. I'm a member of the court, though I use that term loosely these days." He circled her cart like a shark. "Tell me, does Mihai still waste his time with those pathetic graves, or has he found a new hobby in you?" "I don't think that's any of your business." "Oh, but it is. You see, the king has been neglecting his duties, leaving the castle, exposing himself, becoming attached to a human. It's weakness, and weakness in a ruler is everyone's business." He stopped directly in front of her, and his smile was sharp. "Some of us think it's time for new leadership, someone who understands that vampires shouldn't bow to human sensibilities." Fear lanced through her, but Zara forced herself to stand firm. "If you're planning to threaten me to get to him, you should know he won't." "Threaten you? Oh no, little flower girl. I don't need to threaten you." Vasile leaned close, and she could smell something metallic and wrong. "I just need you to disappear. And then Mihai will have one more grave to mourn, and perhaps he'll finally remember what he is." He moved so fast she didn't see it. One moment he was standing in front of her, the next his hand was at her throat, lifting her off the ground. She couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, could only claw uselessly at his iron grip. Then he was gone. Zara crashed to the pavement, gasping, and looked up to see Mihai standing between her and Vasile. He had appeared from nowhere, moving faster than her eyes could track, and he was terrifying. His face was still beautiful, but sharp now, inhuman, and his eyes had gone completely black. When he spoke, his voice was colder than winter. "Touch her again, and I will end you." Vasile laughed, though he kept his distance. "There it is, the monster underneath the gentleman's mask. I was beginning to wonder if you'd forgotten how to be one of us." "I am exactly what I have always been," Mihai said, "a king, and you have just committed treason in my territory." "Your territory? Please. Half the court is ready to follow me. They're tired of your human sympathies, tired of your weakness, tired of—" Mihai moved. Zara didn't see it, could only register that one moment he was standing still, and the next Vasile was on the ground with Mihai's hand around his throat. "Lamki." "Let me be very clear," Mihai said softly. "I have ruled for 400 years. I've ended challenges from vampires far older and stronger than you. I have negotiated peace treaties and won wars and built this court from ash and blood, and I have done it all while maintaining enough humanity to remember why any of it matters." He leaned closer. "You mistake restraint for weakness. That is your first and last error." "Kill me then," Vasile gasped. "Prove you're still strong enough." "No. I'm going to do something worse. I'm going to let you live and send you back to your faction as a message." Mihai's grip tightened. "Tell them that if they want my throne, they're welcome to try to take it. But they will do it openly, through formal challenge, not by skulking in shadows and attacking humans. And tell them that if anyone harms Zara Kensington, I will burn every single one of them down to ash. Consequences be damned. Do you understand?" Vasile managed a jerky nod. Mihai released him and stood, and Vasile scrambled backward before disappearing into the darkness with inhuman speed. Then Mihai turned to Zara, and his face transformed from terrifying to devastated. "Are you hurt?" "I'm okay." Her voice came out hoarse, and she touched her throat gingerly. "You came so fast. I felt it. The moment he touched you, I felt it." He reached for her, then stopped, his hands hovering. "May I?" She nodded, and he gathered her up carefully, lifting her like she weighed nothing. "I'm taking you inside. The castle is safer." "Mihai, what about your court?" What if they really do challenge? Let them. I meant what I said. I am still king, and they will remember why. He carried her through the gates, and they closed behind them with a decisive clang. But first, I need to know you're safe. He took her to a room high in the castle, a sitting room with velvet furniture and walls lined with books. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the warmth was almost shocking after the cold outside. He set her down gently on a couch and knelt in front of her, examining her throat with careful fingers. "You'll bruise," he said quietly, "but nothing is broken. Thank the darkness for that." "You were terrifying," Zara said. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline catching up. "I've never seen you like that." "I know, I'm sorry you had to." "Don't be. You saved my life." She caught his hand. "Mihai, what happens now? Is there really going to be a war?" "Perhaps. Vasily was right that there are factions who disagree with my rule. But this has been building for decades. Your presence didn't cause it, it only gave them an excuse." He looked at their joined hands. "However, it does mean that being near me is even more dangerous than I thought. I should send you away, somewhere far from the city, somewhere they can't find you." "No." "Zara." I said no, I'm not running. She squeezed his hand. "You told me once that you remembered what it felt like to be warm when you stood in my light. Well, you make me feel brave. Like I can be the person my father thought I was, instead of the one who's just been hiding behind a flower cart for 2 years. I'm not giving that up because of some vampire politics." Mihai closed his eyes. "You could die. Everyone dies eventually. At least this way, I get to choose what I'm dying for." She touched his face, and his skin was cold beneath her palm. "And I choose you. However this works, whatever it means, I choose you." When he opened his eyes again, they were black and bottomless, and full of something that might have been hope. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then show me." He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and kissed her. His mouth was cold and gentle, and she felt the absolute control he was exerting, the way he held himself back even as his hand came up to cup her face. When he pulled away, his breathing was unsteady. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he said, "then do it again." This time the kiss was deeper, hungrier, though still controlled. Zara felt heat unfurl in her chest, despite the coldness of his skin, felt her body respond to the careful way he touched her, like she was precious and breakable. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I need to call a court gathering," Mihai said. His voice was rough. "I need to address this challenge before it becomes a full rebellion. Will you stay here? This room is warded, no one can enter without my permission." "How long will you be gone?" "Hours, perhaps. Court politics move slowly, even in a crisis." He stood reluctantly. "There's food in the cabinet, and the bathroom is through that door. Please, stay here until I return." "I will." She caught his hand one more time. "Be careful." "Always." He pressed a kiss to her knuckles, courtly and old-fashioned, and then he was gone. Zara waited. The minutes stretched into hours. She tried to read one of the books on the shelves, but she couldn't focus. She paced the room, examined the paintings on the walls, and tried not to imagine what was happening in whatever council chamber Mihai was dealing with his fractious court. It was nearly midnight when the door opened. Mihai entered looking exhausted in a way that seemed almost human. His hair was disheveled, and there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "What happened?" Zara asked immediately. "A formal challenge has been issued. Vasilei's faction wants a trial by combat me against their chosen champion." He sank onto the couch beside her. "It's an old law, rarely invoked, but binding. If I refuse, I abdicate by default." "And if you accept?" "Then I fight. To the death, probably. Vampires don't have many non-lethal combat methods." Fear spiked through her. "Can you win?" "I don't know. Their champion is an elder named Constantine. He's older than me by a century, and he's been sleeping for the last 50 years, if he's rested and I'm not." He shook his head. "The odds aren't favorable? Then don't fight. We'll leave the city, go somewhere they can't find us. And abandon everyone in this castle who depends on me? The humans who work here, the younger vampires who look to me for protection?" His voice was firm. "No, I won't run. I've spent centuries trying to atone for the people I failed to save. I won't add more names to that list." Zara felt something crack in her chest. Even if it means dying? Even then. He turned to look at her and his eyes were sad. I'm sorry. I know this isn't the future you imagined when you agreed to spend time with me. You deserve better than a man who's about to walk into a duel he might not survive. Stop it. She grabbed his face with both hands. Stop apologizing for being who you are. You're not going to lose. You're going to win. And then we're going to figure out what comes next. And what? Zara, even if I win, this doesn't end. There will be other challenges, other factions, other fights. This is what being king means. It's eternal and exhausting, and you don't have to do it alone. The words burst out of her, desperate and fierce. Turn me. Mihai went very still. What? Turn me. Make me what you are. Then I can stand beside you instead of being something you have to protect. Then I can... No. He pulled away from her hands. Absolutely not. I told you I won't take your humanity. You're not taking anything. I'm offering it. Zara stood, her heart pounding. Mihai, I've been half alive since my father died. Going through the motions, pretending the flower cart was enough, telling myself I was fine when I was just existing. But with you, I feel real again. I feel like I matter. And I don't care if that means being cold or drinking blood or living forever. I care about being with you. You don't understand what you're asking. The turning is agony. You'll die and come back different, and there's no guarantee you'll still want me when you do. You could wake up and hate me for what I've made you. Or I could wake up and finally have a future that doesn't feel like it's ending before it starts. She stepped closer. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of living like this, always wanting, never having, watching the person I care about walk into danger while I stay behind because I'm too fragile to follow. Mihai stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The challenge is in 3 days. There isn't enough time for you to turn and recover before then. You'd be vulnerable, newly made, unable to help. Then turn me after. If you win, turn me. Let that be the future we choose. He spun to face her. And if I don't win, then you'd better fight like hell because I'm not losing you now. Her voice broke. Please, Mihai, let me choose this. Let me choose you. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. If I do this, he said quietly, if I turn you, you need to understand that it's forever. There's no going back, no changing your mind. You'll be bound to this world, to me, for eternity. I know. And you'll have to leave behind everything you were. Your old life, your friends, your daylight. I know. She pulled back to look at him. I understand. And I still want it. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and she tasted something like surrender in it. When he pulled away, his eyes had gone black again. 3 days, he said. Win or lose, in 3 days, we'll talk about this again. And if you still want it then, if you haven't changed your mind, I'll turn you. His hand cupped her cheek. But God's help me, Zara, if I make you into a monster, then we'll be monsters together. She caught his hand. Now tell me about this Constantine. Tell me what you're up against so I can help you figure out how to win. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Mihai trained in the castle's lower levels, sparring with the few court members who remained loyal to him. Zara watched and learned, absorbing the rules of vampire combat, the way they moved and fought and used their inhuman speed. She also met more of the castle's residents. There was Irina, a vampire who had been with the court for 2 centuries and served as Mihai's advisor. She was sharp-tongued and practical, with white hair braided into an intricate crown. So you're the human who's got our king in knots, Irina said when they were introduced. I hope you know what you're doing. Not really, Zara admitted, but I'm trying. That's more than most would do. Irina studied her critically. You're actually considering turning? Yes. Good. He needs someone who isn't afraid to make permanent decisions. He's been drowning in his own guilt for too long. She handed Zara a cup of tea, human food, prepared by the castle's human staff. If he wins this fight, you'll make a good queen. If he doesn't, well, the rest of us will probably be dead too, so it won't matter. Comforting, Zara said dryly. I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to tell you the truth. Irina's expression softened slightly. But for what it's worth, I think he'll win. Mihai is stronger than he believes, and he has something to fight for now. That makes all the difference. The night of the challenge arrived too quickly. The entire court gathered in the castle's great hall, a cavernous space with vaulted ceilings and walls lined with ancient tapestries. Vampires filled the room, some loyal to Mihai, some clearly aligned with the opposing faction, others neutral. The tension was suffocating. Constantine stood at the center of the hall, and he was terrifying. Taller than Mihai, with white hair that fell to his waist and eyes like frozen silver. He looked carved from ice, ancient and immovable. "Mihai Bathory," he said, and his voice echoed, "you have been challenged for the throne. Do you accept?" Mihai stepped forward. He had dressed for the occasion in dark formal clothes that made him look every inch a king. "I accept." "Then let us begin." They fought. Zara had never seen anything like it. They moved so fast she could barely track them, blurs of white and shadow colliding with sounds like thunder. The hall shook. Tapestries tore from the walls. At one point, Constantine threw Mihai across the room, and he crashed into a stone pillar hard enough to crack it. But Mihai got up. Every time he was struck down, he rose again, and slowly, impossibly, he began to gain ground. "He's wearing him out," Irina whispered beside Zara. "Constantine is stronger, but Mihai is faster, and he's angry, truly angry for the first time in centuries." It was true. Zara could see it in the way Mihai moved, the cold fury in his face. This wasn't just about the throne. It was about everyone he'd failed to protect, every name in his garden, every century of guilt and grief. And it was about her, about having something to lose again and refusing to let it go. The fight ended abruptly. Mihai caught Constantine mid-lunge, twisted, and drove him to the ground with enough force to shatter the marble floor. Then, his hand was at Constantine's throat, and his voice carried through the hall. "Yield." Constantine stared up at him, silver eyes wide with shock. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I yield." The hall erupted. Some vampires cheered, others looked furious, but the law was clear. Mihai had won. He stood, helping Constantine to his feet with a grace that seemed deliberate. "You fought with honor," Mihai said, "and you may remain in this court if you choose, but this ends now. No more challenges, no more factions. We are one court or we are nothing." Constantine inclined his head stiffly. "As you say, my king." The crowd began to disperse, some congratulating Mihai, others leaving in silence. Zara pushed through them to reach him, and when she did, he caught her up in his arms, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him standing. "I told you that you'd win," she said. "You did." He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were tired but clear. "Zara, are you sure? About the turning? Because once I start, I can't stop. You need to be absolutely certain." "I am." She touched his face. "I want this. I want you. I want forever." He kissed her softly. "Then come with me." He took her to his private chambers, a suite of rooms high in the castle with windows overlooking the garden. The graves glowed in the moonlight below, peaceful and quiet. "It will hurt," Mihai said. "The venom burns as it transforms you. You'll feel like you're dying because you are, and then you'll wake up and everything will be different. Will you be here when I wake up? I won't leave your side." He guided her to the bed, and his hands were gentle. "Lie down. And Zara, I love you. I should have said it before, but I'm saying it now. I love you." Tears burned in her eyes. "I love you too." He bent over her, his mouth finding the pulse in her throat. "Close your eyes." She did. And then there was pain, sharp and burning and all-consuming. She felt his teeth pierce her skin, felt the venom flood her veins like liquid fire. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The world dissolved into agony, and the last thing she heard was Mihai's voice, soft and steady, telling her to hold on. When she woke, everything was different. The first thing she noticed was the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of too much. She could hear the flutter of curtains in a draft, the distant heartbeat of a human servant 3 floors down, the whisper of Mihai's breathing beside her. The second thing was the colors. Everything was sharper, brighter, more vivid. She could see individual threads in the tapestries, dust motes floating in the air, the intricate pattern of grain in the wooden furniture. And the third thing was the cold. Not unpleasant, just different, like she had become part of winter itself. Zara, Mihai's voice was soft. He was sitting beside the bed, holding her hand. How do you feel? She sat up slowly, testing her new body. Everything felt stronger, faster, more alive despite technically being dead. Strange. Good strange, I think. Look at me. She did. His face was beautiful, but now she could see more the faint tracery of veins beneath his skin, the way his eyes reflected light like a cat's, the absolute stillness that marked him as something other than human. What do I look like? She asked. He handed her a mirror. Zara stared at her reflection. Her skin was paler, luminous in the low light. Her hair seemed darker by contrast, and her eyes, they were still hazel, but there was something different in them now, a depth that hadn't been there before. You're beautiful, Mihai said. You were before, but now you're one of you. One of us, he squeezed her hand. How are you handling it? The change? Zara thought about it. She should probably be panicking, mourning her lost humanity, regretting her decision. But all she felt was relief, like she had finally become what she was always meant to be. I feel right, she said. Is that strange? No, some people are meant for this life. I think you always were. He pulled her to her feet. Come, there's something I want to show you. He led her through the castle and out into the garden. The graves were still there, flowers wilting on their stones. Mihai stopped in the center of the space and turned to her. I've been thinking, he said, about what you said, about memory making you kinder instead of harder. And I realized you were right. These graves, they've kept me trapped in the past, punishing myself instead of honoring them. He gestured to the space. So I'm going to change it. Turn this into a real garden, a living memorial instead of a monument to guilt. Plant flowers that will bloom year after year. Create something beautiful instead of mournful. Zara felt her throat tighten, though no tears came. Vampires didn't cry. You want to build it together? I want to build everything together. He took both her hands. You asked me once where I wanted to go, and I said I didn't know. But I know now. I want to go wherever you are. I want to plant gardens and rule this court and watch centuries pass, and I want to do all of it with you beside me. That sounds perfect. They stood together in the moonlight, surrounded by graves that would soon become a garden. And Zara thought about her father, about how he had taught her to see beauty in growing things, to find hope in small blooms. She wished he could have met Mihai, could have seen what she was becoming. But somehow, she thought he would understand. He had always told her to choose a life worth living, not just one worth surviving. And this cold and immortal and impossible as it was, felt like living. What happens now? She asked. Now we start again. Together. Mihai kissed her softly. We rebuild the court, strengthen our alliances, and create something new. A future instead of a past. And the flowers? We'll still need them, but this time, we'll grow them ourselves. He pulled her closer. What do you think? Can a flower seller and a vampire king build a garden together? Zara smiled, and it felt like the first genuine smile she'd managed in years. I think we already have. They began that very night. Mihai called in gardeners and architects, and they drew up plans for transforming the space. The graves would remain, but surrounded by life, rose arbors and lily ponds, flowering trees and winding paths, a place where people could come to remember without drowning in grief. Zara threw herself into the project with a convert's enthusiasm. She learned about her new abilities, the speed and strength, the heightened senses, the way she could move through shadows. She learned to hunt, to drink blood from donated sources rather than victims. She learned the politics of the court and took her place beside Mihai as his queen. It wasn't always easy. There were still factions who resented her, who saw her as an outsider who had claimed the king's heart too quickly. Mihai stood beside her always, unwavering in his support, and gradually even the skeptics came around. Irina became her closest friend, teaching her the intricacies of vampire society. You're doing well, the older vampire said one evening. They were in the garden, planting a new bed of irises. Better than I expected, honestly. Most new vampires struggle with the transition for years. I have a good teacher, Zara said, and a good reason to adapt quickly. Mihai is different with you, lighter somehow, less burdened. Irina patted soil around a bulb. He smiles now. Did you know that? I hadn't seen him genuinely smile in decades before you came along. He smiles at the flowers. No, dear, he smiles at you. The flowers are just an excuse. Irina sat back. You saved him, you know. From himself, as much as from Constantine. He saved me first, Zara said. He gave me a reason to stop hiding. 6 months after her turning, the garden was finished. It was spectacular acres of carefully designed beds, each one dedicated to someone from Mihai's past. Every grave had become the centerpiece of a themed garden, surrounded by the flowers that person had loved in life. Elena's grave was ringed with daisies. Thomas, a soldier from 1643, had a bed of red poppies. Maria, a baker, had roses the color of bread crust. They held an opening ceremony at dusk. The entire court attended, along with several human guests, people who had lost loved ones and wanted a place to remember them. Mihai gave a short speech about memory and growth, about honoring the past while embracing the future. And then he and Zara walked through the garden together, lighting lanterns that had been placed along every path. It's perfect, Zara said when they reached the center. Your people would be proud. Our people, Mihai corrected. He pulled her into his arms. You did as much of this as I did. More, probably. You have a gift for making dead things bloom. Metaphorically or literally? Both. He kissed her, slow and sweet. Thank you for pushing me to do this, for refusing to let me stay trapped in guilt. Thank you for buying flowers from a stubborn girl with a cart. Best investment I ever made. He spun her in a circle, and she laughed, the sound echoing through the garden. Around them, other vampires began to dance as well, and music drifted from the castle, something old and beautiful. They danced until dawn forced them inside, and as the sun rose over the city, Zara looked out at the garden from the safety of Mihai's chambers. The flowers glowed in the early light, a riot of color and life. I never thought I'd be happy to miss sunrises, she said. Mihai wrapped his arms around her from behind. We can still appreciate them, just from a distance. Like a lot of things in this life. True, but some things we get to hold close. He turned her to face him. You, for instance. I get to hold you close for eternity. That's better than any sunrise. She kissed him, and it still sent sparks through her despite having done it hundreds of times now. You're getting sentimental in your old age. I prefer to think of it as finally allowing myself to be happy. He led her toward the bed, not to sleep, since vampires didn't need it, but to simply rest together. Zara, do you ever regret it? Choosing this? She thought about it honestly. Did she miss sunlight? Sometimes. Did she miss the taste of her father's cooking, the warmth of a hot bath, the simple pleasure of a summer afternoon? Yes. But those were small prices for what she had gained. No, she said. I don't regret it. Do you? Regret turning me? Never. He pulled her close. You are the best decision I've made in 6 centuries, and I intend to spend the next 6 proving that to you. Only 6? I was hoping for at least 10. Greedy. You love it. I love you, he corrected. The greed is just a bonus. They lay together as the day brightened outside, talking about their plans for the court and the garden and the long, impossible future stretching before them. Eventually, other topics came up: the possibility of traveling, of seeing other vampire territories, of finally leaving the castle for more than brief trips. We could go anywhere, Zara said. See everything. You've lived for centuries, but have you actually traveled? Not as much as I should have. I was always too busy ruling or too guilty to enjoy it. Mihai traced patterns on her arm. Where would you want to go? Everywhere, but maybe start with Romania, see where your name comes from. It's a ruin now. The original castle fell centuries ago. Then we'll walk through the ruins together, make new memories in old places. She propped herself up on one elbow. That's what this is all about, right? Not forgetting the past, but not being trapped by it either. When did you become so wise? I learned from a very old vampire king. Old. He pulled her on top of him with supernatural speed. I'll show you old. Their laughter filled the chambers, bright and alive despite everything that should have made them cold and dead. And as they kissed and planned and dreamed together, Zara realized that this was what her father had wanted for her all along, not a specific life or path, but the courage to choose something and commit to it fully. She had chosen Mihai. She had chosen immortality. She had chosen to become something impossible and beautiful and strange, and she would choose it again, every single night, for as long as forever lasted. Years passed. The garden became famous among the vampire community, a place of pilgrimage for those seeking to honor their own lost loved ones. Zara and Mihai expanded it, adding new sections, creating spaces for grief and healing and remembrance. The court flourished under their joint rule. Zara's fresh perspective and Mihai's ancient wisdom complemented each other, and they became known as fair but firm rulers. Challenges still came, but they faced them together, and their bond only grew stronger. On their 10th anniversary, the night that marked a decade since Zara's turning, they stood in the garden together. It was winter, and snow covered the ground, but the evergreen sections still bloomed, creating pockets of color against the white. "Do you remember the first night you refused to sell to me?" Mihai asked. "Of course. You looked so confused, like you couldn't understand why someone wouldn't take your money." "I was confused. No one had challenged me in decades. And then this small, fierce woman with a flower cart decided I didn't get to hide anymore." He pulled her close. "You changed everything. You changed me too, literally." She grinned. "But I think it was a fair trade." "More than fair." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. "I have something for you." Zara took it carefully. Inside was a ring, simple silver, with a small flower carved into the band. "Mihai, we never had a proper wedding. Vampire turnings don't really allow for ceremony. But I wanted you to have something that marked what you mean to me." He took the ring and slipped it onto her finger. "Zara Kensington, you are my queen, my partner, my reason for wanting forever. Will you officially marry me?" She was crying, or would have been, if vampires could produce tears. "Yes. Yes, of course, yes." They held the ceremony a month later, in the garden they had built together. It was a small affair, just the court and a few trusted human friends. Irina officiated, using ancient words that bound them not just legally, but magically, weaving their lives together in a way that even death couldn't break. "You two are disgustingly romantic," Irina said afterward, though she was smiling. "It's going to be insufferable watching you be happy for the next 1,000 years. "You're welcome to find your own happiness," Zara suggested. "There are plenty of eligible vampires around." "Please. I've been single for 3 centuries. I'm not about to ruin my streak now." But Irina hugged them both, fierce and genuine. "Be happy, you two. You've earned it." They were. Not every moment was perfect. Immortality came with its own challenges, its own sorrows. They watched human friends age and die. They faced threats from other vampire territories. They dealt with the endless complications of ruling a court full of immortal beings with very long memories. But they faced it all together, standing side by side in the garden they had built from grief and flowers and stubborn hope. And every evening at dusk, when the first stars appeared, Mihai would take Zara's hand, and they would walk through the paths they had created, past the graves that had become gardens, through the living memorial to everyone they had loved and lost. "Do you think they would approve?" Mihai asked one night. "Everyone we've lost, do you think they'd be happy with what we've built?" Zara looked around at the blooming roses, the flourishing lilies, the carefully tended beds that burst with color and life. "I think they'd be proud. We took something painful and made it beautiful. We turned endings into beginnings. We did, didn't we?" He pulled her close, and they stood together beneath the stars, 2 impossible creatures who had found each other in the twilight and refused to let go. "I love you," Zara said, "for eternity." "For eternity," Mihai agreed. "Though with you, even that doesn't feel long enough." They kissed beneath the winter stars, surrounded by the garden they had planted together, and somewhere in the cold, immortal depths of their shared forever, they bloomed.